You're listening to Informed America Radio, pushing back the frontiers of ignorance 24/7. Now, the Teri O'Brien Show.
May I have your attention, please?
Here we go. Y'all ready?
It's not about being right in the ideological sense of the word. It's about committing common sense every single day. It's politics, it's pop culture, and it's the news of the day, both serious stuff and the water cooler stuff. I've never seen such a bunch of petty, bitter, mean-spirited, vindictive people. And I'm really glad, Democrats, I'm really glad that all the serious problems in our country are solved now. And we can focus on being vindictive over this guy who's going to be ambassador to Belgium. That's like the most important problem we have facing our country right now. Way to go, Democrats. This is what I'm saying. My work is never done. We don't need to investigate the motive. As sad as this is, when you put on the red suspenders.
Put on the uniform.
Yeah, you put on the big shoes, you put on the white face and the red nose and the red makeup, the wig, that crazy looking wig, and you go out there and flop around with the big shoes. I'm sorry, I don't want to see anybody hurt, but I have to say, you're an intimidating and frightening presence in the community at that point. And some might say that without even knowing it, you're actually asking for it because you are dressed up as a clown. One thing we always say is the Second Amendment is not about hunting. The Second Amendment is about the right to keep and bear arms to prevent the government from becoming tyrannical. That's what it's about. It's not about being able to go out and shoot bunny rabbits.
Ooh, what a girl. She's always in a whirl. Always going new places, seeing new faces. That girl on the go.
Teri O'Brien.
Wonderful girl on the go.
Because of this bill, sanctuary cities will continue to get federal funds. The Obama administration can continue issuing visas to countries that refuse to repatriate, take back violent criminal aliens, and the president's executive amnesty continues. Meanwhile, the tax bill that will be moving with this omnibus bill makes permanent the additional child tax credit and the earned income tax credit, and it does nothing to block their future distribution of monies to illegal aliens. A tax credit to a person who doesn't pay taxes is a check from the government. It's not a tax deduction. It's a direct payment. It scores as a welfare benefit by the budget office. So this means more illegal aliens will continue to get the tax credits. And it should be stopped. It should long since have been stopped. This bill explains why Republican and Democratic voters are in open rebellion, as former Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich said recently. Open rebellion. They elect people that they believe are going to take action to protect their security, their jobs, their wages, and what do they get? Bill that is worse than current law. Goes in the opposite direction. No wonder people are upset.
You would have told me this year that we'd be standing here celebrating the passage of an omnibus bill with no poison pill riders at higher levels above sequester than even the president requested. I wouldn't have believed it. But here we are. This bill is a great victory for the principles Democrats stand for.
Merry Christmas, Barack, from the Republicans in Congress here on this pre-Christmas, December 20th, 2015 edition of the Teri O'Brien Show. I can't believe we only have one more show before the end of the year. Coming up at the end of this program, some important announcements about next week's show, and also a little bit of a personal challenge that I might be facing that I would welcome all your prayers and positive energy about. But we'll talk about that later. Right now, let's talk about Merry Christmas from the Republicans, the surrender on the budget, and the magnificent Jeff Sessions there describing exactly what happened in Congress. And I've been warning you for months about the funding of the illegal aliens, the sanctuary cities, the refugee resettlement. And yes, all of our worst nightmares did come true. Oh, and I think I'd left out Planned Parenthood. So we'll hear more from Senator Sessions later in the program. Barack Obama had a press conference on Friday, of course. Now, let's talk about why that is. You know, I said the Republicans said Merry Christmas to the Obama regime as if the multi-million-dollar vacations and Hawaii every holiday aren't enough, right? Now they get this budget thing. But what about Merry Christmas to America from the Obama regime? So that's what I want to talk about here now. First of all, did you ever notice over the last couple of weeks, Barack Obama has been in our face pretty much every 5 minutes? Now, why is that? Well, I think he's trying to pretend that he's doing something. He's trying to make people forget that after the Paris terror attack, he said that it was a setback. That's a quote. In the battle against Islamic radical terrorism. And after 14 people were murdered on American soil in San Bernardino, California, a terrorist act, and a crime, committed by someone that he led into the country. And apparently now we've learned that this woman, this Tashfeen Malik woman, who, along with her dirtbag husband and apparently with the assistance of their very goofy-looking friend, Mr. Marquez, committed this act. But apparently, according to Virginia Representative Bob Goodlatte, they may not have even followed the basic requirements for the so-called fiancé visa, which a lot of people didn't even know this thing existed. But apparently, you're supposed to have to go through a personal interview to get this fiancé visa. And apparently she didn't do that, according to Bob Goodlatte. That's a story in the Daily Caller that I will include in the show notes, a story that just came out Friday. And we're not hearing a lot about, but of course that's why you listen to the Teri O'Brien Show, right? And if you're new to the show, thanks so much for joining us. If you're listening live, of course, if it's 5 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time on Sunday, December 20th, you can actually go to the Live and Lively chat room, and that is at TeriO'Brien.com, TeriO'Brien.com. And we would love to have you there, where we're all chatting about the stories we're discussing here and the issues of the day. If you're not listening live, you're listening on demand, that's awesome as well. You can always contact us at the Teri O'Brien Show at gmail.com. And please follow us on Twitter, twitter.com/Teri O'Brien, TeriO'Brien, just like my cousin Conan. And every Sunday we are here from 5 to 7 p.m. Eastern, where I, from my undisclosed location in a bunker somewhere in flyover country, commit common sense in the age of Obama. So thanks for joining me, and thanks to all of you who help support the show, either by putting some money in the tip jar or starting your Amazon shopping at TeriO'Brien.com. You still have time to buy last-minute gifts at Amazon to get them there by Christmas. So go to TeriO'Brien.com, click on the Gold Deals banner across the top and start your shopping. And then you get the same great prices and service, and we get a few pennies in our bank account. So it's a win-win for everyone. But back to Tashfeen Malik and the fact that she may have not even have ever been interviewed personally as supposed to be required, and came into the country along with her dirtbag husband, and
supposedly, according to Bob Goodlatte, not only was she not interviewed, but she and her husband may never have met in person prior to the time that they were married, which is also supposed to be a requirement. And we know that this Farouk's brother and this goofball friend. Have you ever seen anybody in your life with more goofy looking pictures? There's not one picture of this guy in which he doesn't look like a complete lunatic. Anyway, Mr. Marquez and Farouk, the terrorist's brother, are both involved in marriage fraud, marrying a couple of Russian sisters, and supposedly Marquez was getting $200 a month for being married to this woman that apparently he never lived with. So this whole marriage fraud thing going on, and so Obama wants to be in our face every 5 minutes, so we'll forget that he let this woman, his administration let this woman into the country. And it took him 5 days to call it terrorism. He was 5 days behind his own FBI. So Friday he has another one of these moronic press conferences. And I debated a lot whether to play any audio. I did watch it. It was notable in the fact that he talked about Gitmo and emptying out Gitmo. And he talked about the fact that these detainees are often sent to countries where they are monitored, that's what he said, so it's safe to release them, without mentioning the fact that his own administration's military and intelligence officials say that 1 in 3 of them goes back to the battlefield. So apparently this monitoring is about as effective as the monitoring of people that get the fiancé visa. But, okay, so he said that. He also would not answer the question whether he would use his pen and phone in order to release more detainees. He says he's going to wait and see if Congress will go along with it first, sort of like immigration. If they do what he wants, then it's fine. But if they don't, then he can use the pen and phone. And then he said something incredibly hilarious. He said, well, I know it might be an uphill battle with Congress to get them to agree to close Gitmo, but every battle I've had over the last 5 years has been an uphill battle. Now, the supreme irony of that, on the very day that he gets everything he wants in this budget, and he says, and how many vetoes has he had to issue? 5? 6, I think, if you count. I think they're calling a couple of pocket vetoes, bills that were sent to him that he didn't sign last week. But I think prior to that, there were 4 vetoes over the last nearly 7 years. So he's had uphill battles. There's never been any battle. There's never been any fight with the Republicans. They're scared to death to fight him. That's what Senator Sessions was talking about. That's why everyone's so angry. We thought we elected somebody, a group of people who are going to stop what he has been doing to transform and remake the country. And they don't stop it. They don't even try. The only one who frankly has tried is Ted Cruz, and they despise him. I think it will be hilarious if Ted Cruz gets elected president. At this point, they hate Ted Cruz. They fear him, I think, much more than they fear Donald Trump. I'm convinced of that. And they're really panicking at this point because after they have done everything they can, they've called him names, John McCain and all the members of the establishment have called him names. They've tried to sabotage him at every turn. The folks over at Fox News are, on the warpath to try to marginalize him because they were in the tank for Jeb. And now that it's looking like Jeb is ready to have to pull the plug on this campaign of his that's just a pathetic joke. But he's looking like this. So now they're switching over to Rubio, and they're trying to convince everyone that Rubio and Trump and Cruz had the same position on amnesty, which is a crock and is ridiculous. And I'm going to talk more about the specifics in terms of what was actually in that Gang of 8 bill. But let me just say, if they had the same position, it would have been the Gang of 9 bill, wouldn't it? And Ted Cruz wasn't part of the Gang of 9 because there was no Gang of 9. There was a Gang of 8. So that's a lot of baloney, no matter what they try to say over on Greta's show or Brett Baer's show or whatever Karl Rove wants to say when he goes on there with his whiteboard. But, they're in the tank. So everyone is out for Cruz. But if he gets elected, my God, is it going to be a bloodbath? I don't think he'll be terribly vindictive. I actually think he'll try to bring those people over to our side. Not that I hold out a lot of hope of bringing over a Mitch McConnell, but okay. So, Merry Christmas, though, from Barack. He's going to release more Gitmo detainees. He's also releasing drug criminals. Let me find that story. He just issued a bunch of commutations. Yeah, on Friday, Obama commuted the sentences of 95 prisoners, and I'm reading from a Politico story here by Josh Gerstein and Sarah Wheaton. So it says Obama's latest move brought the number of prisoners receiving commutations during his presidency to 184, a figure that the White House touted, as in they're proud of this, as outstripping the sentence reductions granted by the past 5 presidents combined. However, the tally still remains well short of the thousands of commutations top administration officials and many criminal justice reform advocates foresaw when the White House launched a campaign 2 years ago to solicit commutation requests from among the nearly 100,000 in federal prisons for drug crimes. So, let that sink in. They actually would like to release up to 100,000 federal drug criminals. And apparently they're having a problem because there aren't enough attorneys to help do these petitions for them. Oh, that is so sad. Where's my tiny violin? So not all, it says here, of the 95 commutations on Friday were convicted of drug crimes. A Texas woman served about half of a 48-year sentence for armed robbery under mandatory minimum laws, a term a federal appeals court expressed great regret for, but declined to overturn. A Georgia man had served 8 years of a 15-year sentence for being a felon in possession of a firearm. Okay, so now here's a question. These people that he gave commutations to, the 2 I just mentioned, were both convicted of crimes involving firearms. Now, this is the administration that wants more gun control, and yet they're releasing or commuting the sentences of people who used firearms in the commission of crimes. What's wrong with this picture? Of the 93 who had their drug sentences commuted in the new batch, 40 were serving life terms. Well, that means they must have been serious drug dealers. It's unclear how many of those receiving commutations met all the criteria the administration laid out for the clemency drive. Now, remember, I guess it was October, we talked about this on the show. A couple members of Congress, I believe it was Bob Goodlatte in the House and Senator Grassley in the Senate, wrote to Loretta Lynch, the Attorney General, and asked for more specifics on these commutations. As far as I know, they never got an answer to their question. They basically were just ignored. But they wanted to know about, who these folks were, what were the criteria, and that's pretty much, I think, ignored, because I know I contacted Bob Goodlatte's office, and they said they would let me know if they ever got an answer. Now, maybe they just didn't let me know, but I checked their websites, and they haven't said anything about that. So it says, at least a few appear to have had firearms in their possession when carrying out their drug crimes. So, okay, I think somebody ought to ask the next time that stooge, Josh Earnest, shows up in front of the podium, somebody should ask him, okay, if the president is so opposed to gun crime, why is he commuting sentences of people who use guns in the commission of crime? That would be an interesting thing to know, wouldn't it, Bitterklinger? But Merry Christmas to you from the regime as they release drug criminals who they no doubt hope will eventually very soon be eligible to vote. And one other thing, Bitterklinger, understand during this holiday season, that the one is trying to understand that your little pea brain, saturated by fear-mongering that you see on cable TV, is making you very nervous and uncomfortable and suffering a lot of anxiety over things like San Bernardino. And as difficult as it will be, given the disparity between his enormous intellect and your room temperature IQ, he promises that in between rounds of golf, during his luxurious Hawaiian vacation, he will try to watch a little more of this moronic cable TV that amuses you little brains so much, so he can try to relate a little bit better. So once again, Merry Christmas from the Obama regime. Gitmo detainees released, drug criminals released, sanctuary cities funded, refugee resettlement funded from all over the planet, including jihadist hotbeds, illegals continuing to just pour in over the southern border, twice as many of these illegal Central American children as last year. How many of them are going to be members of MS-13? I guess time will tell. We've also got a Second Amendment update coming up. I'm going to play you more Jeff Sessions audio. And oh my God, Donald Trump completely owned George Stephanopoulos this morning. I mean, it is hilarious. We will hear that. A Democrat debate last night? Yeah, there was. Did you know that? Did you miss anything? I'll tell you what happened there, which basically is nothing. But we'll get into that. That and lots more on this December 20th, 2015 edition of the Teri O'Brien Show. I will be right back.
You're listening to the Teri O'Brien Show.
So, I'm a dog, and I just got adopted by this new human guy, and I'm starting to wonder how he got along without me. I mean, okay, something as simple as walking around the block. He's got this leash thing, and he puts me on one end and him on the other, and I'm just taking him around. I think he's afraid of getting lost. Without that leash and me guiding him along, I don't think he'd find his way back home. But it's kind of cute.
A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet. Be that person. Adopt. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org.
In recognizing a communist, physical appearance counts for nothing. If he openly declares himself to be a communist, we take his word for it. If a person consistently reads and advocates the views expressed in a communist publication, he may be a communist. If a person supports organizations which reflect communist teachings, or organizations labeled communist by the Department of Justice, she may be a communist. If a person defends the activities of communist nations while consistently attacking the domestic and foreign policy of the United States, she may be a communist. If a person does all these things over a period of time, he must be a communist.
But generally, if you look at how I've tried to govern over the last 4 years and how I'll continue to try to govern, I'm not driven by some ideological agenda. I'm a pretty practical guy, and I just want to make sure that things work. And one of the nice things about never having another election again, I will never campaign again, is, I think you can rest assured that all I care about is making sure that I leave behind an America that is stronger, more prosperous, more stable, more secure than it was when I came into office.
Yeah!
America, under the current regime, is a great nation in peril. Her economy stagnant, and her precious Constitution under siege from those who have sworn to defend it. Every day, brave patriots refuse to surrender their country to the forces of darkness. They know that America's future hangs in the balance, and that there is only one way to defeat the lies, slanders, and fear-mongering and take their country back. It's not complicated. It's simple. It's the truth. And there's no better source for truth than the Teri O'Brien Show, where America's original conservative warrior princess, fearless and cheerfully, speaks truth to power. The Teri O'Brien Show and TeriO'Brien.com, defending and protecting America 24/7.
You know the threat is real. You sit in meetings with advisors and operatives who tell you there could be Islamic sleeper cells in every major American community. You know the southern border is a welcome mat for terrorists to enter our towns and neighborhoods at will. You know about their plots to kill us in our shopping malls, our sports stadiums, and our office buildings. You won your office by talking like a champion of freedom. Now it's time to act like one. Pass a national right to carry law that guarantees my constitutional right to defend myself, my family, and my fellow Americans anywhere inside our borders. And make sure the enemies of freedom know the power of freedom. No law-abiding American should be forced to face evil with empty hands. I'm the National Rifle Association of America, and I'm freedom's safest place.
I have to interrupt right here and tell you that one of my visits, I won't name him, I don't want to embarrass him, but one of the heads of state that I met with on this visit, he gave me one while I was on the way. Told me the story about the two fellows in the Soviet Union that were walking down the street, and the one of them says, "Have we really achieved full communism? Is this it? Is this now full communism?" And the other one said, "Oh, hell no, things are going to get a lot worse."
Product of the corrupt Chicago political machine, a thin-skinned, narcissistic, unqualified, empty suit who is not a natural-born American citizen and therefore probably not eligible to hold the office of President of the United States. Now she has seen the light, and with the help of the ABCs of Barack Obama, understanding God's greatest gift to America, you can too. This information-packed, well-researched book is loaded with supporting links and is available on Amazon.com for the amazing price of $1.99. Yep, $1.99. And here's some more terrific news. You don't need a Kindle or tablet to read it. You can read it right on your computer, PC, or Mac. So, if you can use Facebook, you can enjoy this essential read. Please don't hesitate. Download it now. It's the perfect thing to read as you wait for Barack to finish transforming America and healing the planet. For more information, please visit http://www.TeriO'Brien.com. Thanks again for your encouragement and support.
Do you want to help the Teri O'Brien Show stay on the air? It's simple. Just start your Amazon.com shopping at TeriO'Brien.com by clicking on the Amazon Gold Box Editors Picks banner at the top of the page. That's TeriO'Brien.com. Then the show will get a small percentage of what you spend at no additional cost to you. It's a win-win. Teri, producer Thomas, and the K9 associate producers thank you very much.
If a nation expects to be ignorant and free in a state of civilization, it expects what never was and never will be. Thomas Jefferson. You're listening to Informed America Radio.
Teri's book, The ABCs of Barack Obama, Understanding God's Greatest Gift to America, is available on Amazon.com, Smashwords.com, and the iBooks store. Get yours today.
She's like a fist inside a velvet glove, softly shattering left-wing stupidity. The Teri O'Brien Show, proud member of the Red State Talk Radio Network.
Red State Talk Radio.
The Talk Monster.
I think the president has about 3 problems. First of all, 16 days of golf coming and golfing pictures at a time we're facing a terrorist threat. That's not going to be good for him. Secondly, I think he wants to show that he's got something going against terrorism where it doesn't seem to be that he does right now. We don't really understand our strategy.
Chris Matthews from Friday here on this December 20th, 2015 edition of the Teri O'Brien Show. Gee, it sounds like the tingle is not going up the leg anymore. Wow. Last week we talked about how Chris Christie's bromance with Obama was clearly over after the stuff he said during that debate on Tuesday night. And now it looks like even Chrissy is starting to lose a little bit of the man crush. Not completely. I have to say not completely. We'll get back into that. We'll talk more. We're going to hear more Jeff Sessions audio about this just outrageous budget, which Paul Ryan appeared on Meet the Press this morning and defended, basically using the same lame defense they always use, that, you know, we have divided government and this is all we could get, and next year will be different. You know, it's kind of like the Cubs, you know, wait till next year. But the thing is, as I said, they never even try. Ted Cruz is the only one who actually tries to make the argument. And as Margaret Thatcher famously said, first you make the argument, and first you win the argument, and then you win the election. They don't even try to win the argument, because the simple fact of the matter is they don't want to win the argument. They like big government almost as much as Barack Obama. So, but anyway, he defended that, and he's walking around with that beard. What is up with Paul Ryan and the beard? I mean, what is he going for, imam or something with that beard? I mean, come on, that has got to go. We've got a Second Amendment update coming up in this hour. And the next hour, we'll talk more about election 2016. But first, I want to talk to you about a book I've been reading and enjoying. And I told you about this book before when I first started reading it. And you guys know that I am not a reader of fiction books. I almost never read fiction books because, frankly, there are too many nonfiction books sitting in my pile of to be read, or sitting on my iPad in my Kindle app or my iBooks app. And so I rarely get to read fiction books, novels. But when I do, you guys know that I am a fan of the writing of Professor Anthony LaRose. He is a professor of criminology, as many of you know. He's also an Air Force veteran, and he's very, very knowledgeable about Latin America. He's traveled and lived in Latin America over the past 20 years. He's published many, many academic articles in English and Spanish. And his first book, of course, Cathedral Assault, was a really enjoyable read. And the other great thing about that book was the profits went to assist our veterans, our heroes. But now he has another book, a new book, Juarez, Seeds in the Desert, that I can really, really recommend. A fast-paced thriller book, a page-turner, I would call it. And it is about an actual real-life situation, sort of ripped from the headline, something all of you guys would be really interested in, because it does involve the lawless activity along the border, the U.S.-Mexico border. And you may not know, but this is really a distressing fact that since 1990, over 1,000 women have gone missing in the border town of Juarez, Mexico, which is on the border with El Paso. And so this book, it involves the protagonist, a guy named Nat. He's an American, and he wants to find out what happened to his sister-in-law, who has gone missing. So when you read this book, you will get to immerse yourself in this world of drug cartels, corrupt cops, Mexican military, all of this stuff. You'll really enjoy the characters. I think that's what I enjoy most about the books, the Cathedral Assault and this book. The character of Nat, the character of the police detective, Fernandez, the really slimeball, privileged playboy that is involved in all of this, Pancho. So it's all about this reality along the border, but it's, fictionalized with these great characters. So here's what I'm going to recommend. I'm going to put in the chat room a link to where you can go get it. You can get a paperback if you prefer that, or you can just download immediately to your Kindle or other tablet. And now, when you do the tablet thing, you can actually get a sample chapter, and I think that that's a great way to experience the book. And once you get through the sample, you're going to want to get the actual book because the Kindle version is only $1.99. So, holiday time is often a time when it's very hectic, and then as soon as the holidays are over, we've got that last week of the year, where we have maybe a little bit more free time, where we can actually give ourselves the gift of a little leisure reading that is not related to work or that is not related to any of the depressing things that I have to tell you about here. And I plan to take advantage of that time and finish reading Whereas Seeds in the Desert by Dr. Anthony LaRose. I'll put the link in the chat room. Of course, the link will be in the show notes at terryobrien.com, where you'll get links to all the articles we talk about here on the program, as well as links to things like Whereas Seeds in the Desert, a terrific book by Dr. Anthony LaRose. So check it out, please. It's a pick to click. Okay. Oh, wait. What's that sound I hear?
When a man's in trouble or in a good fight, you want all your friends around them, preferably armed.
You can't say Americans are not more violent than other people.
No.
All those people killed in shootings in America?
Oh, shootings. Yes, but that doesn't mean Americans are more violent than other people. We're just better shots.
Live in a world without guns.
That's very sweet, but a little naive.
I swear to uphold and protect the Constitution of these United States. So relax, gun nuts. I can't touch you.
Oh, yeah. Second Amendment update, regular feature here on the Teri O'Brien Show. Okay, we've got a couple of stories we need to get to, and I need to get to that screen. You guys know the Teri O'Brien Show is paperless. Yes, it is. So that means when I'm telling you about a story, I have to actually open the link. So, yeah, I know. You're thinking, I should have had this link open before. That's true. I should have had it open. Oh, well. Okay. Couple of things. Some liberal over at the Huffington Post wrote a piece that is really, really ignorant. Her name is Samantha Page Rosen, and it's called Stop Hiding Behind the Second Amendment. So this is from yesterday. The Second Amendment does not protect an individual's right to own a firearm. That's how she starts, and she goes from there. And basically just says that this is something manufactured out of whole cloth by the NRA, and, somehow I guess they convinced the courts to go along with it. It's really reflects a tremendous lack of understanding of the legislative history of the Constitution and also just the plain language of the Constitution. And it never ceases to amaze me how liberals can not see things that are plainly written in the language of the Constitution and the legislative history, but they can find things that are not there. Things that, of course, emanate from some mythological penumbra that they invent, some fantasy from a liberal wet dream, and that has nothing to do with the Constitution. But they've managed to find abortion in there, gay marriage is in there. None of this is in there. Second Amendment, on the other hand, is actually in the Constitution. And they need to, and I would definitely recommend to this Samantha Rosen that she check out the legislative history and understand that the left, people like the folks over at the Daily Kos and all these folks who want to sneer at Justice Antonin Scalia and call him a crackpot and say he's not right in the head. These are things they have said. Because of his support for the Second Amendment, they need to go back and take a look at the legislative history. It's clear that the founders definitely supported an individual's right to keep and bear arms. The people at the time of the writing of the Constitution would be stunned to hear people suggest that there's no personal right to keep and bear arms. They need to take a look at Federalist 46. That is one of the Federalist Papers written by the author of the Second Amendment, James Madison. And James Madison in Federalist 46 is describing the tension between the federal government and the state government. And he says, basically, if the federal government ever becomes tyrannical, the check against that is a well-armed public that could defeat the federal army if they had to do that. So I mean, the liberals like to talk a lot about militias. In many states, every able-bodied adult is a de facto member of the militia. Now, I obviously don't accept the theory that the Second Amendment creates a limited right to keep and bear arms only for people that are in a militia. But even if that's true, in many states, if these folks would check their constitutions, they'd see that every able-bodied adult is in the militia, number one. Number two, a lot of state constitutions have a right to keep and bear arms built right into the constitution of the state. And a lot of those added and enforced and enhanced the right to keep and bear arms in their state constitutions within the last 50 years. So the argument that a lot of the liberals make that, this Second Amendment, it's so archaic. It's, just a throwback. Well, if that's true, then why did so many states decide to enhance their public or their state right to keep and bear arms in the last 50 years? So that's a crock of baloney. So I'm looking here at a portion of the New Hampshire Constitution from 1794. Government being instituted for the common benefit, protection, and security of the whole community, and not for the private interest or emolument of any one man, family, or class of men. Therefore, whenever the ends of government are perverted, and public liberty manifestly endangered, and all other means of redress are ineffectual, the people may, and of right, ought to reform the old or establish a new government. The doctrine of non-resistance against arbitrary power and oppression is absurd, slavish, and destructive of the good and happiness of mankind. And that's why we have the Second Amendment. So I will put, of course, a link in the show notes to this piece from this woman over at Huffington Post, Stop Hiding Behind the Second Amendment. You guys can go over there and comment. I'm sure you'll have a lot of fun. Now, the other thing I want to bring up involves Justice Scalia and Justice Thomas, who, as this guy over at National Review, Josh Blackman, in a piece dated December 8th, notes, are really the only two members of the Supreme Court who are willing to stand up for the Second Amendment. So he writes in a piece called, the headline, Justice Thomas, Second Amendment is not a second-class right in quotes. In 2010, 5 Supreme Court justices invalidated Chicago's handgun ban, rejecting the argument that the Second Amendment was a second-class right. Turns out only 2 of them, Justices Thomas and Scalia, really meant it. For the last 5 years, the right to keep and bear arms has been trapped somewhere between legal limbo and constitutional purgatory. The lower courts continue to whittle away at the Supreme Court's ruling rulings in District of Columbia v. Heller and McDonald v. Chicago, where 7 justices stand by, quietly refusing to intervene. Twice this year, Justices Thomas and Scalia have called out their colleagues for abdicating the judiciary's safeguard of the Second Amendment. First, in June, the justices sat idly as San Francisco rendered it impossible for law-abiding citizens to keep a handgun for self-defense. Second, yesterday, so that would have been Friday, December 7th, the Supreme Court looked the other way as Highland Park, Illinois, criminalized an entire class of rifles owned by millions of Americans. In each case, the hard-fought victories to vindicate the right to keep and bear arms have slowly and painfully been chipped away. A careful study of Justice Thomas's passionate yet reasoned dissents charts a proper course to restore the Second Amendment to its esteemed place in our Bill of Rights. And I will, of course, link to the opinion itself as well as to Josh Blackman's piece. Josh Blackman, by the way, is a law professor at the South Texas College of Law in Houston, and he is the author of this excellent piece that will be in the show notes. So he writes of the San Francisco case. It says that a handgun must be locked at all times at home unless it is, quote, carried on the person, unquote, of the owner. Good luck opening the trigger lock during a nighttime break-in. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals upheld this law, finding it was a reasonable safety measure, though it applies even if there are no children present. The case was appealed to the Supreme Court, but the majority of justices refused to vote to hear it. In June 2015, Justice Thomas wrote a dissent from the denial of review, which was joined by Justice Scalia. Dissents from denial of certiorari are extremely rare, but more important, this was the first time the justices had weighed in on the right to keep and bear arms since McDonald in 2010. Justice Thomas was flummoxed by how the Ninth Circuit ignored the Supreme Court's rulings. Quote, despite the clarity with which we describe the Second Amendment's core protection for the right of self-defense, he wrote in the dissent, lower courts, including the ones here, have failed to protect it. He continued saying that, quote, Second Amendment rights are no less protected by our Constitution than other rights enumerated in that document, and that he found the court's unwillingness to defend the Second Amendment difficult to account for in the light of the fact that it often reviews other violations of cases concerning the First, Fourth, and Eighth Amendments. Quote, I see no reason, Thomas concluded, that challenges based on the Second Amendment rights should be treated differently. His admonitions were unheeded. Then he talks a little bit about the Highland Park case and how this, in that case, involves bans on magazines that can hold more than 10 bullets and so-called assault weapons, basically firearms that millions of people have. So here's the best part, though. Justice Thomas penned a thoughtful dissent joined by Justice Scalia, and this is in the Highland Park case. Thomas charged the Seventh Circuit, and that's the circuit in which Illinois is, had a, quote, crabbed reading, unquote, of Heller, and, quote, ignores Heller's fundamental premise that the Second Amendment is an independent individual right unconnected to what the militia needs. Now, here's the best part. Most strikingly, the Court of Appeals explained that even if the law didn't actually improve safety, the law was valid because it, quote, may increase the public's sense of safety, unquote. In other words, it makes people feel good. Thomas dismissed such faulty reasoning. Quote, if a broad ban on firearms can be upheld based on conjecture that the public might feel safer while being no safer at all, then the Second Amendment guarantees nothing. I will put a link to this excellent piece from the National Review by this law professor, Josh Blackman, in the show notes at terryobrien.com. I commend it to your attention, and it is a great reminder of how important the next election is, right? Because the next president is no doubt going to get to appoint some Supreme Court justices, and, you know, Justice Scalia is in his 80s now. So we don't want the court to be packed with liberals who think that constitutional means what they like and unconstitutional means what they don't like. We'd like to actually have some legal scholars who can read and interpret the Constitution. So that's just another reason why the next election is so very important. I will be right back.
She's America's original conservative warrior princess, daring to fearlessly and, more importantly, cheerfully commit common sense in the age of Obama. You're listening to The Teri O'Brien Show.
Control me with violence and intimidation. You think you can muzzle me with fear? Don't ever confuse me for my politicians or my media. I am an American, free-born and free-bred, and I will call you out for who you are. An Islamic extremist who would kill me for my beliefs. You don't intimidate me. My freedom is more powerful than anything you can possibly do, and I will never, never surrender my rights to your terror. I will say what I think, worship according to my beliefs, and raise my children how I see fit, and I defend it all with the Second Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. I cower to no one, because I am the National Rifle Association of America, and I am freedom's safest place.
Okay, so Sarah, I'm dropping you off at Emily's?
Yep.
And Josh, you're going to?
Soccer, Dad. Soccer practice.
Right. Oh, by the way, I just wanted to let you know when I pick you both up, I'll be wearing my short shorts.
What? No!
Yep, and my dorky dad hat, and I'm going to do my dad dance for all your friends. They'll love it!
Seriously? Why?
Because I like my short shorts. Of course, I could be talked out of it if you guys would just buckle up your seatbelts without giving me a hard time.
It's important to get your kids to buckle up for safety, no matter what it takes. And sometimes, all it takes is your parental powers of persuasion.
Okay, we're buckling up. See, all buckled.
Good choice. I'll just have to do my dad dance at dinner time. What?
No!
Do what you have to make sure your kids are wearing their seatbelts, even on short drives. Never give up until they buckle up. A message from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council. Visit safercar.gov/kidsbuckleup for more information.
Sure, humans can be a little weird at times, but take it from me, I'm a dog. And a person is about the best thing that can happen to a shelter pet. So if you want to learn how you can be that person, get down to your local pet shelter or visit theshelterpetproject.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Dear John, I was hoping it wouldn't come to this, but you've left me no choice. I'm leaving. Uncontrolled high blood pressure is really serious, and lately you seem to really not care. I've been there for you since day one, and I know you think I'm gonna keep ticking, but no, my friend, I can quit whenever I want. Why can't we get back to the good times, when we were more active and ate more healthy foods, and you checked on me every once in a while? Is that too much to ask? I don't want to leave, but unless you stop ignoring me, what else am I supposed to do? Remember, when I quit, you quit. Sincerely, your heart.
Listen to your heart. Don't let it quit on you. Doing the minimum to control your high blood pressure isn't doing enough. High blood pressure can lead to a stroke, heart attack, or death. Get your blood pressure to a healthy range before it's too late. Find out how at heart.org/blood pressure. Check, change, control. A message from the American Heart Association, the American Stroke Association, and the Ad Council.
She's America's original conservative warrior princess, daring to fearlessly and, more importantly, cheerfully commit common sense in the age of Obama.
You're different from other girls. That's what you think. You're smarter. You're almost like a man.
You're listening to The Teri O'Brien Show.
An empty head is not really empty. It is stuffed with rubbish. Hence the difficulty of forcing anything into an empty head. Eric Hoffer. You're listening to Informed America Radio.
Teri's book, The ABCs of Barack Obama, Understanding God's Greatest Gift to America, is available on Amazon.com, Smashwords.com, and the iBook store. Get yours today.
She's like a fist inside a velvet glove, softly shattering left-wing stupidity. The Teri O'Brien Show, proud member of the Red State Talk Radio Network.
Red State Talk Radio.
The Talk Monster.
Hey, thanks again for joining me in this pre-Christmas edition of the Teri O'Brien Show. Just to have closure on this budget thing, I mentioned Paul Ryan was on Meet the Press this morning, and basically when Chuck Todd asked him about how angry many of us are about this budget, he says he doesn't pay attention to it, to any of this. The fact that Chuck Schumer and Harry Reid think this budget is great. So does Barack Obama. The Politico story about Obama's year-end press conference the headline is Obama year-end press conference. Obama spikes the football. So he thinks he got everything he wanted, and I agree. But just to have a little bit of background so you know what this budget funds, it completely funds the DACA, the illegal amnesty for the Dreamers, completely funded. So that's in there. Sanctuary cities are completely funded. Division B, Title II of the Omnibus gives various grant programs to the Department of Justice, and there's no language in there that would restrict any of these grants to sanctuary cities. It funds all the refugee programs. Remember, since last June, I have been asking you to light a fire under your member of Congress to get them to sponsor the proposal by Representative Brian Babin, a Republican of Texas, to halt the refugee resettlement. That language was completely left out. Division H, Title II of Ryan's bill, has appropriations for the Department of HHS, Health and Human Services, and has no language in there that would restrict any of the refugee resettlement, nor is there any language in Division K, which provides State Department funding that would have any restriction. And of course, Paul Ryan was not one of the co-sponsors of Babin's bill because he told Sean Hannity he didn't want to sponsor that because, quote, we're a compassionate country, unquote. And oh, by the way, Marco Rubio also against using the power of the purse to stop funding Obama's resettlement operation, which has got nothing to do with compassion and everything to do with changing the demographics of the country to enhance the political fortunes of Democrats. Also, it funds all of the various immigration programs like the fiancé visa and all these green cards for these refugees. And we'll hear more from Senator Sessions talking more about that, including the fact that instead of using money to deport illegals, there's money in here to resettle illegals. See, that money should be used to deport illegals. Also, it funds the release of criminal illegals. It quadruples the H-2B foreign worker visas. It funds tax credits for illegals. And it, of course, locks in big spending increases. But one thing they're not spending money on is building the border fence that they promised to build back in 2006. So let me close this hour with what I opened the program with. Merry Christmas, America, from Barack Obama and his enablers in the Republican Congress. What does Hillary have to say about how we're doing against ISIS? Oh, and Donald Trump absolutely owning George Stephanopoulos. So all that in the second big hour of the Teri O'Brien Show. I, of course, as always, will be right back.
We just want to say that we're not spirit bunnies anymore. We always hated that name. It bugged the heck out of Dina and me. It's just such a put down. Really. We know you've got a lot of spirit, everybody, right? And we're going to destroy Lincoln next week, all right? You know, it takes a lot of courage to get up here and do something that you know people will make fun of.
Ooh, what a girl. She's always in a whirl.
Always going new places, seeing new faces. That girl on the go.
Teri O'Brien.
Wonderful girl on the go.
For years, the American people have suffered under the lawless, dangerous, wage-reducing immigration policies of this administration. They sent us to Washington. They sent us here, the people did, to protect their interest, to protect the people's interest, to ensure the defense of their families, and to advance the common good, the public interest. They did not send us here to bow down to the president's lawless immigration policies, nor to line the pockets of special interest in big business. That's not what we are here for. Who do we represent? This omnibus bill approves the president's request for increased refugee admissions, allowing him to bring in as many refugees as he wants, and he can bring them from anywhere he wants, and allow them access to unlimited welfare and entitlements at the taxpayer expense, which is not scored as a cost.
Senator Jeff Sessions from last Thursday talking about this disgraceful omnibus budget that the Republicans gifted to Barack Obama before he was on his way out the door to his luxurious Hawaiian vacation. I didn't grab audio from this presser because I think I've told you, I think it's torture to make you guys listen to it. I will tell you, right at the end of this press conference on Friday, he said, well, gotta go. Got to get to Star Wars. So, yeah. So, we've got ISIS on the march. We've got more and more potential jihadists coming into the country. And he's off on vacation, but first he's got to go see Star Wars. So at least he's got his priorities straight, right? Okay. There's a couple of things I want to get into. I mentioned before the break. Why is Obama enabling our enemy? And we've talked a little bit about this before in the past. Why, if Obama's not a Muslim, and I'm not saying he's a Muslim, but on the other hand, to claim that you're a Christian because you spent 20 years in the pew listening to some screeching, racist, anti-Semite, I think that's sort of like saying that being a stripper makes you officially a member of Little Sisters of the Poor. I mean, I really don't think there's a lot of Christianity going on at Reverend Wright's church, but regardless, that's the church he belonged to, the closest he's ever come to belonging to a church. I don't even think they belong to a church in D.C. I don't think they ever have. But I'm not saying he's a Muslim, but if Barack Obama is not a Muslim, he is definitely a Muslim sympathizer and apologist, isn't he? based on his enabling of the Iranian regime, based on his many statements that he has made about Islam and how the call to prayer is the most beautiful sound he's ever heard. The future will not belong to those who slander the prophet. And what is that statement he made in one of his 2 autobiographies? Because, with a guy like this, one autobiography would never be enough, right? But what did he say about Islam in that book? Let me find the quote. Yeah, the quote is, "I will stand with the Muslims should the political winds shift in an ugly direction." And that's on page 261 of The Audacity of Hope. Or do you say The Audacity of Dope? Audacity of Hope, by the way, a phrase borrowed from the aforementioned Reverend Wright. I mentioned also that the only time that Barack Obama had any semblance of a normal family, and not that the family I'm going to describe is Ozzie and Harriet, but when you consider his really twisted family tree, when he was living in Indonesia with his mother, his stepfather, and his half-sister as a nuclear family, that's the closest he's ever had to an actual normal nuclear family. So I think, of course, he has a soft spot in his heart for Islam and for Muslims, and he's going to stand with them if the political winds shift in an ugly direction. So, of course, he wants to enable as many of them as possible to come into the country, right? And that's what he's doing with this refugee resettlement, and it has the additional benefit of enhancing the political fortunes of Democrats. So it's a win-win for him. It's a lose-lose for the country, but that doesn't matter. Now, I don't know if you guys remember, but it's been actually 3 years since this guy has been a guest on the Teri O'Brien Show. But a guy who's writing that I admire a great deal is Daniel Greenfield. And I am going to link to a couple pieces that he has written recently. One, Protecting Ourselves from the Next Peaceful Massacre. This was written on the heels of the San Bernardino massacre. An excellent piece. And let me just share a little bit from this piece with you. He says, Obama and the media would like to make this story about gun violence, but guns don't shoot themselves. There's a hand that pulls the trigger and a mind whose foul purposes that hand serves. Gun violence is not a mechanical problem. It's not a hardware problem of guns going off at random. It's not a biological problem of fingers randomly twitching on triggers. It is a problem of the mind. Behind each massacre, there is a mind, and it is that mind, its ideas, its beliefs that kills. San Bernardino is home to what is described as a, quote, growing Muslim population, unquote, and that growth comes with terrifying growing pains. The latest attack appears to be one of them. It is a matter of simple math. Now pay attention. This is a very profound and important point that he's making, and very, very true. It is a matter of simple math that as the population most likely to commit terrorist acts increases, so do the acts themselves. And that's, if you look at these surveys of the Muslim population across the world, including in America, between 5 and as many as 25% say that violence is always or sometimes justified in the defense of Islam. So naturally, repeating what he says here, it's a matter of simple math that as the population most likely to commit terrorist acts increases, so do the acts themselves. And as Rick Santorum said in the debate last Tuesday, and he made an excellent point, one that is obvious but not often stated, and that is, of course, not every Muslim is a jihadist or a terrorist, but every jihadist is a Muslim, and that is a fact. Getting back to this piece, 2 months ago, Marilyn Snyder of the Redlands Tea Party Patriots wrote of, quote, the runners and spectators of the Boston Marathon who never imagined that refugee jihadists were stealthily plotting their demise just because they were not Muslims, unquote. Most people in San Bernardino County did not expect that anyone was plotting to kill them. They did not think that one evening the events from far off France would suddenly be taking place where they lived. And yet, that is the new reality. Islamic terrorism can strike anywhere and everywhere. Getting back to what this lady from the Tea Party wrote, while it is impossible to prevent death delivered by madmen who kill themselves because of religious extremism, it is possible to put in place federal policies that limit the influx of Muslim extremists through wide open refugee doors of the Obama administration. Marilyn wrote, that remains true. Saeed Farouk, like Nidal Hassan, did not suddenly fly over here from Syria, but that only makes it more vital that we prevent the next attack and the next massacre by closing the doors and keeping our country safe. But of course, as we've heard during this edition of the program, that budget that Paul Ryan gave to Barack Obama as a Christmas present does exactly the opposite. So he says, we cannot bring back the dead, the victims of the long, horrifying role of Islamic terror that stretches back for thousands of years, but we can protect the living. The left approaches this as a mechanical problem, but it's an ideological problem. It's a conflict between two sets of ideas and two sets of worldviews. It is a war between those who believe that men must be ruled by the dead will of Muhammad and his brutal successors, and those of us who believe in the freedom of our founding documents and the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is not a war that we will win through appeasement or disarmament, and we can begin to fight back by protecting ourselves and our country. Quote, we Redlanders and all Americans need to stand up with common sense and judgment with an emphatic no to Syrian refugee resettlement. It's time to bar the doors against jihadi infiltration, Marilyn wrote. From Redland to Paris, it's time we did the right thing for our towns and our cities. Absolutely believe she's totally true. And I hope all of you did at least make the effort to try to get your representatives to defund this refugee resettlement, because, he's absolutely right. The more of this population that comes in, the more San Bernardinos we're going to have. Now, he also has another piece I want to mention, because I don't know if you heard that Donald Trump is in big trouble because the round mound whose lies astound, as I like to call him, and that's Michael Moore. Yeah, Michael Moore says he's coming for Donald Trump. He has a piece here. Let me find this piece here in the bookmark. I don't see it here. I'll put it in the show notes. But I do have Mr. Greenfield's piece about Michael Moore, because Michael Moore posted something, I think it was on Facebook, where he said, we are all Muslims. Oh, that's just beautiful. So he starts his piece. I love this. Does Michael Moore realize that Muslims aren't supposed to eat bacon and drink beer? If he really goes through the Muslim thing, he might actually lose weight. And he says, but you have to feel sorry for Moore. The Obama years have been terrible to him. During the Bush years, the Democrats embraced his fake working class shtick and made him a very rich man. No one needs him anymore. His biggest hit was a cynical attack at the Bush administration over 9/11. He's had nothing worth mentioning since then, and it's easy to see why he's smelling opportunity if a Republican, especially Donald Trump, gets in the White House. So here we are standing in front of So here he is, standing in front of Trump Tower in his fake working-class togs, looking vaguely embarrassed with a "We are all Muslims" sign, as if he's back to playing the ordinary guy protester, even though he could easily afford Trump Tower. And what does he even mean? Islam is a religion. If we were all Muslims, we would all convert to Islam. That's what ISIS is trying to do. In what sense is Michael Moore a Muslim? In no sense at all. The attached letter is typical Michael Moore self-promotion blather that is 90% imaginary. Moore claims that Donald Trump was terrified of him. Even the biggest Trump hater would have trouble believing that. Oh, that's for sure. They would have an easier time accepting that Trump is the literal reincarnation of Hitler than that he was afraid of a weaselly fat guy who has to go everywhere with 9 bodyguards while making up fake stories about all the times his bodyguards had to risk their lives to defend him from pencils and hot coffee. Long since upstaged by the likes of Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert, Michael Moore sounds exactly like what he is, an aging baby boomer leftist who barely understands what he's talking about. that boogeyman in your mind are all Muslims, not just the ones who have killed, but all Muslims. And all Muslims is in capitals. More squeals. There's not much point in being worried about people who've already killed. They're usually dead or in jail. It's the ones who are plotting attacks that we have to worry about, which is why Trump, Cruz, and the others have called for an immigration moratorium on the group that's doing the killing. So then he goes into reading more from this moronic Michael Moore piece. He says, if you want to ban Muslims, you're going to have to ban me. Well, I wouldn't be against that. He says, and everyone else, because we're all Mexican, we're all Catholic and Jewish and white and black and every shade in between. And so Mr. Greenfield says Mexico is a country. To be Mexican, you have to be a citizen of Mexico. Seriously, stop by the Mexican consulate and tell them you're Mexican. I would pay good money to see that. And we're all black? Does that mean we can get rid of affirmative action? If we're all Catholic, do we have to all go to Mass and then to synagogue since we're all also Jewish? This is ridiculous gibberish from a washed-up hack. So you can read the whole thing at terryobrien.com in the show notes from today's edition of the program. I think you will definitely enjoy it. Okay. Now, you're going to really enjoy what's coming up because we are going to hear Donald Trump actually own George Stephanopoulos from this morning's edition of This Week. And you're really going to like it. I promise you. Also, Jeb, or do you say Jeb with an exclamation point? Jeb, Mr. You can't insult your way to the presidency, calls Donald Trump a jerk. And says he's glad he did it. It made him feel so much better. And Hillary, last night's debate, what she had to say about ISIS. And, I'll tell you everything you need to know about this boring, pointless debate, as if you really need to know anything. But I'll be right back.
You're listening to the Terry O'Brien Show.
So, I'm a dog, and I just got adopted by this new human guy, and I'm starting to wonder how he got along without me. I mean, okay, something as simple as walking around the block. He's got this leash thing, and he puts me on one end and him on the other, and I'm just taking him around. I think he's afraid of getting lost. Without that leash and me guiding him along, I don't think he'd find his way back home. But it's kind of cute.
A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet. Be that person. Adopt. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org.
In recognizing a communist, physical appearance counts for nothing. If he openly declares himself to be a communist, we take his word for it. If a person consistently reads and advocates the views expressed in a communist publication, he may be a communist. If a person supports organizations which reflect communist teachings, or organizations labeled communist by the Department of Justice, she may be a communist. If a person defends the activities of communist nations while consistently attacking the domestic and foreign policy of the United States, she may be a communist. If a person does all these things over a period of time, he must be a communist.
But generally, if you look at how I've tried to govern over the last 4 years and how I'll continue to try to govern, I'm not driven by some ideological agenda. I'm a pretty practical guy, and I just want to make sure that things work. And one of the nice things about never having another election again, I will never campaign again, is, I think you can rest assured that all I care about is making sure that I leave behind an America that is stronger, more prosperous, more stable, more secure than it was when I came into office.
Yeah!
America, under the current regime, is a great nation in peril. Her economy stagnant, and her precious Constitution under siege from those who have sworn to defend it. Every day, brave patriots refuse to surrender their country to the forces of darkness. They know that America's future hangs in the balance, and that there is only one way to defeat the lies, slanders, and fear-mongering and take their country back. It's not complicated. It's simple. It's the truth. And there's no better source for truth than the Teri O'Brien Show, where America's original conservative warrior princess, fearless and cheerfully, speaks truth to power. The Teri O'Brien Show and TeriO'Brien.com. Defending and protecting America 24/7.
You know the threat is real. You sit in meetings with advisors and operatives who tell you there could be Islamic sleeper cells in every major American community. You know the southern border is a welcome mat for terrorists to enter our towns and neighborhoods at will. You know about their plots to kill us in our shopping malls, our sports stadiums, and our office buildings. You won your office by talking like a champion of freedom. Now it's time to act like one. Pass a national right to carry law that guarantees my constitutional right to defend myself, my family, and my fellow Americans anywhere inside our borders. And make sure the enemies of freedom know the power of freedom. No law-abiding American should be forced to face evil with empty hands. I'm the National Rifle Association of America, and I'm freedom's safest place.
I have to interrupt right here and tell you that in one of my visits, I won't name him, I don't want to embarrass him, but one of the heads of state that I met with on this visit, he gave me one while I was on the way. Told me the story about the two fellows in the Soviet Union that were walking down the street, and the one of them says, "Have we really achieved full communism? Is this it? Is this now full communism?" And the other one said, "Oh, hell no, things are going to get a lot worse."
Product of the corrupt Chicago political machine, a thin-skinned, narcissistic, unqualified, empty suit who is not a natural-born American citizen and therefore probably not eligible to hold the office of President of the United States. Now she has seen the light, and with the help of the ABCs of Barack Obama, understanding God's greatest gift to America, you can too. This information-packed, well-researched book is loaded with supporting links and is available on Amazon.com for the amazing price of $1.99. Yep, $1.99. And here's some more terrific news. You don't need a Kindle or tablet to read it. You can read it right on your computer, PC, or Mac. So, if you can use Facebook, you can enjoy this essential read. Please don't hesitate. Download it now. It's the perfect thing to read as you wait for Barack to finish transforming America and healing the planet. For more information, please visit http://www.terryobrien.com. Thanks again for your encouragement and support.
Do you want to help the Teri O'Brien Show stay on the air? It's simple. Just start your Amazon.com shopping at TeriO'Brien.com by clicking on the Amazon Gold Box Editors Picks banner at the top of the page. That's TeriO'Brien.com. Then the show will get a small percentage of what you spend at no additional cost to you. It's a win-win. Teri, producer Thomas, and the K9 associate producers thank you very much.
If a nation expects to be ignorant and free in a state of civilization, it expects what never was and never will be. Thomas Jefferson. You're listening to Informed America Radio.
Teri's book, The ABCs of Barack Obama, Understanding God's Greatest Gift to America, is available on Amazon.com, Smashwords.com, and the iBook store. Get yours today.
She's like a fist inside a velvet glove, softly shattering left-wing stupidity. The Teri O'Brien Show, proud member of the Red State Talk Radio Network.
Red State Talk Radio.
The Talk Monster.
Nothing in the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity. Martin Luther King. You're listening to Informed America Radio.
The voice of American conservatism. WRS Digital, Red State Talk Radio.
Broadcasting from a secured bunker in an undisclosed location in flyover country, outside the East Coast bubble and far from left coast insanity. You're listening to America's original warrior princess, Teri O'Brien. Learn more at TeriO'Brien.com.
Under this bill, it will ensure that at least 170,000 green cards, that means permanent residency with a guaranteed path to citizenship, refugee and asylee approvals will be issued to migrants from Muslim countries just over the next 12 months. It contains dramatic changes to federal immigration law that would increase by as much as fourfold the number of low-wage foreign workers provided to employers under the controversial H-2B visa program. You go into hotels and you go into restaurants. Are not Americans doing those jobs? H-2B workers are supposed to be here to fill seasonal jobs that Americans allegedly won't do. That's what they say, those who want more, cheaper labor. At a time of record immigration, we do not appreciate the scope of it. We're on track. We already have the highest number of foreign-born in American history. But I just want to say we're at record levels.
Senator Jeff Sessions from last Thursday, prior to the vote on the omnibus budget bill that sold out the country, here on the Teri O'Brien Show. And people wonder why people like Ted Cruz and Donald Trump, who the establishment cannot stand, are actually getting major traction. And the latest polls in Iowa say that Ted Cruz is ahead, but I'm sure Donald Trump disputes those. But one challenge I think Donald Trump is going to have is a lot of the folks that support him, I don't think have been involved in politics before. But of course, you could say the same thing about Barack Obama. He also had people that never voted before. And so, we'll see what happens going forward. He's doing very well. And one reason he's doing very well is because of performances like the one on This Week with George Stephanopoulos this morning. Now, first, I need to play for you something from the Democrat debate last night. Did you know there was a Democrat debate? Yeah, there was. It was on ABC. And it featured, of course, Hillary, the commie fossil Bernie Sanders, and the hapless, pathetic Martin O'Malley. And, it's not bad enough for Martin O'Malley that nobody knows who he is. He takes his guitar to Wall Street and he's, on the corner there looking like a complete doofus playing his guitar. Nobody even knows who he is. Nobody approaches him. But it's not bad enough. But last night, he had to endure the indignity of having Hillary Clinton, of all people, tell him to tell the truth. Seriously. I mean, I guess that's like Bill Clinton telling somebody to honor his marriage vows, right? Anyway, so those three were up there. It was pretty pointless. It was boring and pretty much a waste of time. I mean, once Bernie Sanders said that he's sick of hearing about Hillary's email, he pretty much surrendered right there. So that, is pretty much over. The race. So, but, they're carrying on the pretense. And, there was this kerfuffle last week about some Bernie Sanders staffer that supposedly looked at the Clinton campaign's research, went into their data, somehow infiltrated through a third party or whatever. It was one of those like scandals, quote unquote, or big, huge issues in the newsroom at CNN, and no one else really gives a damn. But he apologized to her about that. But what we need to hear is what she said last night about Donald Trump, because then you're going to hear the response from him on This Week.
I worry greatly that the rhetoric coming from the Republicans, particularly Donald Trump, is sending a message to Muslims here in the United States and literally around the world that there is a clash of civilizations. And we also need to make sure that the really discriminatory messages that Trump is sending around the world don't fall on receptive ears. He is becoming ISIS's best recruiter.
Hillary Clinton from last night's Democrat debate on ABC here on the Teri O'Brien Show. Well, of course, Hillary, there is a clash of civilizations, as the piece by Mr. Greenfield so eloquently describes. But she went on to say, and I thought I'd grab the whole bite, she went on to say that Donald Trump is not only ISIS's best recruiter, but that ISIS is, quote unquote, literally using video of him to recruit new terrorists. And that claim has been universally determined by everybody, liberal media, conservative media, everybody, to be completely untrue. Or if it's true, no one can find any evidence anywhere that ISIS is actually doing that. Okay, so George Stephanopoulos asked Donald Trump about that this morning.
To Mr. Trump, right now, we saw that tweet. Mr. Trump, you going to stand by it?
Well, of course I'm standing by it. It was vetted. They went to the Washington Post. Fox News went out in great detail and looked for it, and there's no such video. And they may make one up, knowing the Clintons and knowing Hillary, but there's nobody. She just made it up. I mean, she made it up. It was a soundbite, just like Bernie Sanders lied. I mean, he went out and said things that never took place. I didn't say that about Mexicans. I have great relationships with the Hispanics, and I didn't say what he said. You know, they make up things in the world of politics. They're all talk and no action. They're politicians.
Donald Trump from this morning's edition of This Week with George Stephanopoulos here on the Teri O'Brien Show. And what he was talking about with Bernie is Bernie, right after Hillary said that the ISIS recruiters were literally using video of Donald Trump to recruit ISIS members, Bernie got up and said, well, you know, this is what happens with a guy like Trump. He says, you know, all Mexicans are murderers and rapists and all Muslims are terrorists. And, you know, of course, he never did say that. So that's what he's responding to there. But he wasn't finished talking about Hillary and her lies. And this is where he starts to take it to George. Listen closely to the end of this bite.
You sure you want to go? You sure you want to go down that road? The fact checkers have called you out on more false statements than any other candidate.
In advance? Oh, I'll go down that road. And, you know, people maybe call me out, but they turn out to be wrong also. And many of the things I've said, and I think just about all of them, they may have been controversial at one point, George, but they're not controversial in the end because people start to say, you know, Trump's actually right. And you go into illegal immigration, everybody now is coming my way with illegal. I've been 100% right as far as crime is concerned, as far as the economy is concerned. I've been right on more than anybody else has been right by a
Well, you've
big
never come up
factor.
with a video of those thousands of people cheering in New Jersey on 9/11.
Oh, there were plenty of people cheering, believe me, and I've come up with plenty. And the Washington Post wrote a story that they tried to retract, and there were many other stories written, and a lot of people, thousands of people, have been calling and writing and emailing. Many people saw it, and it was in New Jersey, and it was also all over the world, George. So there's an obvious problem, because all over the world, and you're not even disputing that, but people were celebrating all over the world, and I think it's disgusting.
There were people celebrating in the West Bank. There were not people celebrating in New Jersey as far as any evidence we have seen. But I do want to move on.
Of course there were, George.
Right now.
There were articles, George, there were articles written about it. There were people celebrating. And, in fact, if you look at the famous Washington Post article that he tried to retract, there were articles written about it. Don't tell me that. There's no reason to apologize. There were people celebrating.
Donald Trump from this morning's edition of This Week with George Stephanopoulos here on the Teri O'Brien Show. See how he doesn't let George get away with anything? And I didn't mention before when I was talking about Hillary, talking about this non-existent recruiting video that ISIS is using of Donald Trump. There she goes again. Where have we heard this before? About it's all because of a video. Haven't we heard that somewhere before? And I would ask too, what has helped ISIS more? Hillary's and Obama's foreign policy, their lead from behind policy, their destabilization of Libya, or Donald Trump trying to protect our country from an invasion of potential jihadists? Which one has helped ISIS more? I mean, it's ridiculous. You ask the question, it's, you know, manifestly ridiculous. But I mean, you heard there, I think, a big part of why Donald Trump is doing well. Also, the issue of Vladimir Putin came up, and we'll get into that. But I wanted to get into the issue of this controversy of, and it's still being asked of everyone, what do you think of Donald Trump and his idea that we're going to keep out all Muslims? What do you think of that? They asked Mitch McConnell about that today, and they asked Chris Christie. They ask everybody. And it was brought up again this morning. George Stephanopoulos mentioned Putin and his words of admiration for Trump, which you've no doubt heard about, and we'll get into that in a minute. But then he played some video of David Cameron condemning Donald Trump. So take a listen, though, to the response there.
Ability. So if Putin respects me and if Putin wants to call me brilliant and other things that he said, which were frankly very nice, I'll accept that, and I'll accept it on behalf of our country. Because if we get along well with Russia, that's a positive thing, George, not a negative thing.
Well, you want to get along well with Putin, but you seem to be alienating some of our allies. You said that Angela Merkel is ruining Germany. And here's what David Cameron, the British Prime Minister, had to say about your proposal to ban Muslims.
I happen to disagree with her about Donald Trump. I think his remarks are divisive, stupid and wrong. And I think if he came to visit our country, I think he'd unite us all against him.
Is it wise to be praising our adversaries and alienating our allies?
George, I know you're having a lot of fun this morning, and so am I, if you want to know the truth. The fact is that we have a problem, George. You don't have to admit it, because I know you want to be so politically correct all the time. You don't have to admit it. But we have a problem, and the problem is a very serious problem. You have a radicalization of people. They happen to be Islamic, and you have the radical Islamic terrorism problem that our president doesn't even want to mention. He doesn't want to use those three words or any one of those words, and because he's not mentioning it, we're never going to solve it. Unless you know what the problem is, you can't solve it. So we have a serious problem where you look at what happened in California last week, you look at people flying airplanes into the World Trade Center, you look at many other things that have been happening not only in this country but around the world, including in Paris. There's a problem, George. You have to address it. And if you're not going to address it, the problem's going to get worse and worse. People have to turn other people in. People knew what was going on in California. People knew what was going on. Other people, outsiders, friends of theirs, knew what was going on in Paris. Those people don't turn them in. Why don't they turn them in?
Well, they should turn them in. I agree with you on that.
Well, they should turn them in, but they're not going to turn them in with attitudes like your attitude. People won't turn them in. People are just going to go along the way. We have to solve a very serious problem. And if you don't want to talk about it, or if you think it's politically incorrect, that's your problem, not mine.
Donald Trump from this morning's edition of This Week on ABC here on the Teri O'Brien Show. So I think we hear there, anybody who wants to understand why Donald Trump is doing well, just listen to that little exchange and you'll understand. We have some more Trump audio, and we have, let's see. Oh, Hillary. What does she think about where we are in the battle against ISIS? And of course, Jeb Bush. I know it's almost as bad as Obama audio, but we've got that and more here on the last segment of the Teri O'Brien Show coming up. I will be right back.
This is Cheryl Atkinson, and you're listening to The Teri O'Brien Show.
I'm a good person. I never bothered anybody. But I can't afford a nice house in a safe neighborhood. I live in a government high-rise. Gangbangers and drug dealers walk down our halls every day. My neighbors and I were scared. We called the police, but they can't keep us safe. Some of us are too afraid to even leave our apartments. But the housing authority told me if I bought a gun to protect myself, they throw me to the streets. If I'm not free because of my address today, what makes you think you'll be free tomorrow? I marched behind Martin Luther King at Selma. I know my rights. Now I have my gun. I am the National Rifle Association of America, and I'm freedom's safest place.
Where do you want to go to lunch? I'm having a stroke. Did you hear what I said? I'm having a stroke. Why aren't you answering me? I'm having a stroke. What's up with your face? I'm having a stroke. That's not normal. Is something wrong? I'm having a stroke. Are you having an allergic reaction? I'm having a stroke.
When someone is having a stroke, they may not be able to say it with words, but their body language will tell you loud and clear.
I'm having a stroke.
You just need to know the sudden signs. Look for FAST, F-A-S-T, F, face drooping, A, arm weakness, or S, speech difficulty. Then T, time. Time to call 911 immediately, because the sooner they get to the hospital, the sooner they'll get treatment. And that can make a remarkable difference in their recovery. Know the sudden signs. Face, arm, speech, time. Spot a stroke fast. Visit strokeassociation.org. Brought to you by the American Stroke Association and the Ad Council.
So, I'm a dog, and I'm kind of new to this family, but I've noticed a trend. My humans do this thing where they go around and get all my toys and hide them in this basket, but it's always the same basket, and it's always the same place, and then they act so surprised when I find them, but I'm like, hello, that's where you put it last time. Humans are the worst at hide and go seek.
A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet. Be that person. Adopt. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org.
All right, listen up, maggots, because I have something to say that you might want to hear. It's for every man 18 through 25 years old. Now, you want to live in my United States of America? Then you have got to register with Selective Service. It's a privilege, and it's the law. The fact is, you must register before you can qualify for student loans, most federal jobs, or job training. Now, you say you want to be a U.S. citizen? Well, get with the program. You've got to be registered to qualify. Now, Charlie tells me that we need to go online at sss.gov or fill out a Selective Service registration form at any post office. You did that already? Outstanding! You've earned my respect. Hoorah!
Register with Selective Service online at sss.gov or at the post office.
It's the law.
So I'm a cat, and I just moved in with this new human, and she's got this little toy she's always playing with, all day long. Tap, 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 bloop, bloop. She can't put it down. There it is. Oh, and get this. She even talks to it. Last week she asked it for Chinese, and guess what? Egg rolls showed up. Like magic. Humans have cool toys.
A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet. Be that person. Adopt. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org.
At highway speeds, the average text takes your eyes off the road for about 5 seconds. That's enough time to travel the length of a football field. Stop texts. StopWrecks.org. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
You're listening to Informed America Radio.
Ms. O'Brien.
Brian.
She's about
as hard right and at least, if not more, articulate than Limbaugh.
Well, she's popular.
There's something about this bitch that's really spectacular.
Yeah, for a popular girl, she's pretty popular. She's about being sensible.
Well, she can make them talk about themselves, the way it says girls should do in those teenage columns.
Know-it-all, bitch.
Basically, I'm in love with her. Enough! Blah!
Ready for more hot girl on government action? The Terry O'Brien Show.
Yes! 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 Yes!
Live in vivid red, white, and blue.
Every Sunday, 4 to 6 p.m. Central Time.
Or on demand, anytime, at TerryO'Brien.com.
You cannot insult your way to the presidency. You can't disparage women, Hispanics, disabled people. Who is he kidding? This country is far better than that. And the idea that he's actually running for president and insulting people is deeply discouraging, to be honest with you. And I think we should reject that out of hand. I hope you're going to reject it by voting for me. But a guy like that should not be the front-running candidate of our great party. That is not how we win. I feel better now. I gave myself therapy there. Thank you for allowing me to do it.
Jeb Bush from a New Hampshire appearance last week here on the Terry O'Brien Show, explaining that you can't insult your way to the presidency while calling Donald Trump a jerk. Oh, okay. Okay, that makes perfect sense. Also on the Republican side of the aisle, Rand Paul says that Marco Rubio should resign from the Senate because he didn't show up for the budget vote Friday. And that Cruz should admit that he has changed his mind about legal status for illegals. That's not really true. That's not really true. As I said at the beginning of the program, if the positions of the two guys were the same, Cruz and Rubio, then it would have been a gang of 9, not a gang of 8. But of course, it was a gang of 8, not a gang of 9. And therefore, these attempts by these apologists for Marco Rubio to suggest that Ted Cruz it has the same position or almost the same position, I'm sorry, that's just not accurate. It's just not true. And they need to stop saying it. I wrote a piece about this Gang of 8 bill and the stuff that was in it, the immigration system that Marco Rubio wants. And by the way, he has not really backed away from it at all. But the stuff that's in there is really astounding. Of course, it's another one of these huge, couple 1,000-page bills that A, no one reads, and B, almost no one understands. And of course, if you don't read it, how will you understand it? And it contains a lot of opportunities for people to misrepresent what's in it. I mean, just one thing I can think of right off the bat, you heard when they were proposing this thing that this bill would be really tough on criminal illegals and that if they were criminals, they would never be able to get this provisional status that is sort of their initial legalization. But what does it mean to be a criminal under this law? It says if you have 3 misdemeanors or a felony, but the 3 misdemeanors all have to be committed on different days, and they have to be, so you could actually have 3 misdemeanors, which is not at all uncommon, to have three misdemeanors out of the result of the same incident, but that would only count as one under this Gang of 8 law. That's just one thing. I mean, there's a ton of things in there. And Ted Cruz never supported any of that stuff. And he claims, and I think rightly so, if even Dana Bash at CNN can figure it out, that he was attempting to kill the bill by allowing legalization, but not citizenship. Because, of course, the Democrats and the amnesty proponents all want citizenship so these people can vote. That's the whole point. So, and Jeff Sessions, someone who we've heard from a lot on this program today, said that but for Ted Cruz, amnesty would have passed. So, I mean, that's a pretty ringing endorsement, in my opinion. So I think the Rubio campaign needs to stop saying that, and particularly when, as I just pointed out before the break, when it comes to this refugee resettlement, Rubio was against defunding that. And Cruz was in favor of defunding that. So that's just completely inaccurate. All right, so Hillary, ISIS. Hillary, in the debate last night, said this about ISIS.
Look at these complex problems. I wish it could be either or. I wish we could say, yes, let's go destroy ISIS and let's let Assad continue to destroy Syria, which creates more terrorists, more extremists by the minute. No, we now finally are where we need to be. We have a strategy and a commitment to go after ISIS, which is a danger to us as well as the region.
Hillary Clinton from last night's Democrat debate. So we're where we want to be when it comes to fighting ISIS. Really? I guess we should ask the people in San Bernardino about that, huh? And of course, her apologists were all over TV today. First of all, A, they're standing by that. Okay. It's interesting. B, they're saying that she meant we're where we want to be because now there's a UN resolution. Oh, yeah. Because we know whenever the UN shows up, everything works out perfectly, right? I think that's going to be a problem for her to say that. I really do. I think that that is a problem.
We now finally are where we need to be.
Yeah, I know. What difference does it make, right? Anyway, all right. So, Trump and Putin. So, Putin, as you know, expressed some admiration for Donald Trump, right? Okay, so George Stephanopoulos got into it. And now this is where Trump is, when you hear this, you can see Trump may not be a politician, although, when you have to make deals and negotiate, there's a lot of politics involved in that and a lot of political skill involved in that. And I think that these bites sort of illustrate that fact that he may not be a politician, but he does have great political skills. When he's asked about Putin, and a lot of people in the media are pretty horrified. And, I have to say, when this all first came out on Morning Joe on Friday is when it came out, when they asked him, Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski asked Trump, Putin's expressing admiration for you. What do you think of that? And he said, he's a leader compared and a lot better leader than what we have now, basically, in our country. And Joe Scarborough says, yeah, but he's a guy that kills journalists. And Trump said, well, we do a lot of our own killing. That was the answer. So this is what led to him being asked about this. So George asked him about that. Let's hear the first part of the exchange. Specifically, George wants to know, what about the fact that Putin, you say you admire him as a leader, but he's a guy who actually kills journalists.
It's never been proven that he's killed anybody. So, you're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, at least in our country. He has not been proven that he's killed reporters.
But then you said, I think our country does plenty of killing, too. What killing are you talking about there ordered by the United States government?
Well, take a look at what we're doing in the Middle East. We went into Iraq. We shouldn't have. You know that I was opposed to going into Iraq. Many years ago, in 2003, 2004, there were headlines in Reuters that Trump is opposed to the war because you're going to destabilize the Middle East. I said, if you do this, you'll destabilize the Middle East, and Iran will take over. Very simple. Iran will take over Iraq. That's exactly what's happening. And on top of that, we have ISIS, which is another problem and another complicating factor. Now, we should have never gone into Iraq. When we left, we made a mistake. We made a big mistake with Libya. We've destabilized all these places. We now have a migration with thousands and hundreds of thousands and even millions of people that don't know where they're going.
Donald Trump from this morning's edition of This Week with George Stephanopoulos here on the Teri O'Brien Show. You see how he completely turns the subject around from whether Putin killed people or killed reporters, which, is something a number of these watchdog groups have said. And I have the story here in the pile. I'll have to find it. But he turns it around from that to talking about how the Middle East is all screwed up. And that's largely because of Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. But it gets better. There's more. There's more.
I mean, it's a terrible thing. We have been run by incompetent people, incompetent politicians. They don't know. And that's probably why I'm leading so high in the polls, because people are tired of seeing very, very stupid and very, very incompetent people running our country into the ground. In the meantime, we owe $19 trillion, soon going to be $21 trillion, and we better get our act together fast, George, because our country is going down if we don't.
Your comments seem to suggest a moral equivalence between the United States and Russia. Is that what you believe?
I'm not saying anything. I'm saying when you say a man has killed reporters, I'd like you to prove it. And I'm saying it would be a terrible thing if it were true. But I have never seen any information or any proof that he killed reporters, George. You're just saying he killed reporters. You and other people tell me he killed reporters. I don't know that he killed reporters. I haven't seen it. If he did, I think it's despicable. I think it would be horrible. But you're making these accusations, and I don't see any proof. And by the way, he totally denies that he kills reporters. He totally denied it.
Donald Trump from this morning's edition of This Week with George Stephanopoulos here on the Teri O'Brien Show. You see what he did there? He turns it from, are you saying there's moral equivalency with what the United States does and what Putin does, to the fact that we're being run by stupid, incompetent people. I mean, I love it. It's brilliant. Okay, now, this morning, speaking of election 2016, this morning, also on This Week, one of our favorite useful idiots, Matthew Dowd, said, and he really said this, that he thinks Bernie Sanders could beat Donald Trump. Well, that reminded me of a little snippet of audio that I grabbed from C-SPAN this morning when a caller from Ohio said this.
Why not wait until the Democratic voters actually go out and vote and see what they want? If I had a choice today between Hillary Clinton, if I had a gun to my head and it was between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, I would vote for Donald Trump.
Really?
Because Donald Trump is not in the bag for corporations. Hillary Clinton is a corporate Democrat, which is just as bad as a Republican.
Okay. Elise from Warren, Ohio. Thanks for the...
Yeah, all these people claiming that, these liberals and Democrats saying, oh, Hillary would love to run against Trump and, she'd beat him like a drum. I'm not so sure when I hear calls like that. I'm not so sure at all. Okay, I want to take a very short break before we come back and I share a little bit about next week's show and also a couple of challenges that I'm going to be facing coming up in the next couple of weeks that I'd like your positive energy and prayers for. I'll be right back.
There was an elderly lady selling pretzels, and every day he'd go by and he'd put a quarter down and never take a pretzel. Go on in. He was being very charitable, and this went on for some time. And he came along one day, put down his quarter, and she took him by the arm. And he looked at her and he said, "Oh, you probably want to know why for this full year I've been leaving 25 cents on the plate and not taking a pretzel." And she said, "No, I just wanted to tell you that pretzels are 35 cents now. And as he was falling, grabbed a limb sticking out the side of the cliff and looked down 300 feet to the canyon floor below and then looked up and said, "Lord, if there's anyone up there, give me faith. Tell me what to do." And a voice from the heavens said, "If you have faith, let go." He looked down at the canyon floor and then took another look up and says, "Is there anyone else up there?" Reminds me a little bit of the story of the man that took his young son-in-law out and was going to introduce him to golf and told him all that he had to do and teed up the ball, and the kid took a swing and he missed the golf ball entirely but hit a ant's nest there and into the air, and so lined up and took a crack at it and again hit another gouge out of the ant's nest, and now there were ants flying all the way through the air, and as he lined up for the third try, 2 ants peeked out of the crater that he'd left, and one of them said, "If we want to survive this, we better get on the ball."
Remember when we had a real president like Ronald Reagan? Okay, kids, so here's the deal. Next Sunday's show, we always do kind of a retrospective, and I would love it if you would send your ideas to me at the Teri O'Brien Show at gmail.com. Or if you're a premium member in that you donate monthly to the show, you can write to me at premium@terryobrien.com. I read and respond to all notes received at that address. Tell me what you think was the most underreported story. What do you think was the most cringe-inducing story of the year? What do you think was the biggest takeaway of the year? Send me that, and we will be talking about that next week. Now, as far as these challenges I mentioned, I am going to be having a major encounter with the healthcare system over the next few weeks. I don't think it's going to impact the show. I think I'll still be able to do the show. I may have to do it from my bed, but I will be doing the show. So I'd appreciate your thoughts and prayers about that. I don't think it's anything serious. It was completely unexpected out of left field, and I'm completely asymptomatic. But I did want to give you that heads up. I'll be here next week, and then we'll see what happens going forward. Remember, though, the show never ends at TeriO'Brien.com. So please go there regularly. You don't know what you're going to miss. I wish all of you and yours a very, very Merry Christmas. Stay tough, because only the strong can stay free.